Hello everyone, welcome to the 4LadsHadADream podcast. My name is Stevie Clifford and this is the February edition of the podcast. Joining us as normal is co-host, he is the chief sports writer at the Glasgow Times, Mr. Chris Jack. Chris, how are you?
Hi Stevie, all good, thanks for having us on once again.
Yeah, great to have you, Chris. And this month's special guest is former Rangers player, former Northern Ireland international, Mr. Dean Shiels. Dean, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on, Dean. As most people know, Dean signed for Rangers back in 2012. He won the Scottish League 2, Scottish League 1 and Scottish Championship, as well as a Petrofac, and was a huge part of our journey up the leagues. Before we get to talk to Dean about his time at Rangers, Dean, you started your career at Arsenal, coming through the youth ranks there. Who was your early heroes in football, and what was your early influences?
Well, at that stage, obviously, before I arrived at Arsenal, obviously, you've got the Northern Irish players, George Best and all that there, people like that. But when I arrived at Arsenal, it was obviously the players in the first team were just phenomenal. Just to be in and around that environment and that culture, it was just it was brilliant for any young player of trying to sort of find his way in the game and learn things. And you all know I was actually there when they had the Invincibles, the team. So Bergkamp was there, Henry, Perez. They had all these players, that core, that English core of Adams, Seaman, all that sort of thing. So you couldn't help but learn off those types of players, just being in and around it.
Yeah, they're obviously magnificent players, and it was definitely a fantastic run by Arsenal. Something similar is happening in the English Premiership at the moment with Liverpool. But getting back to, obviously, your career, the Scottish fans would have got to know you with your spell at Hibs, and then you went down to Doncaster, but it was your move to Kilmarnock. You came back and you played under your dad there. And Kilmarnock, during your year, you had a fantastic year. You were shortlisted for the SPFA Player of the Year, but it was a run in the League Cup, particularly the semi-final when you scored the winner against Ayr United, if memory serves me right, to take Kilmarnock into the final where you played Celtic. How enjoyable was that run for you? And was that kind of semi-final into the final your highlight of your time at Kilmarnock?
Yeah, it was. We had a great season that year. We played with such freedom. I don't think I've ever been involved with a team. We went out and just tried to score more in the opposition, and we got it off the keeper, and we just tried to play expansive football, and it was good to be part of. And then obviously to finish the season with the trophy, it just made it even more special. The semi-final was a frustrating day because Ayr literally just put every single player they had in front of their 18-yard box and had absolutely no intentions of trying to score a goal. So they were trying to get penalties, and it was very frustrating. And it took us late into extra time to actually get the breakthrough. And it was more relief that day than anything, because I think obviously they say it was the biggest derby in Ayrshire, biggest Ayrshire derby in history or whatever, but it was very frustrating for us, and we were under all the pressure because of obviously being the Premiership side at the time, and we had been going well, but it was more relief that day of getting to the final. And then obviously when we met Celtic, we had high confidence of beating them because we had done really well against the Old Firm all season that year, and we had really strong beliefs that we'd win going into that game.
That form certainly caught the eye of Ali Mccoist. You also scored at Ibrox just after Rangers' kind of troubles with finances had begun. You scored the winner at Ibrox as well. That led Rangers to come for you in the summer of 2012. What were your early impressions of Ali Mccoist and dropping down so many leagues, Dean? Was it a difficult decision to join Rangers, considering where they were?
It was just a difficult time for the club, and obviously I was a free agent at the time. My contract had expired, and I was already living in Glasgow, and I knew there was some sort of interest from Rangers, but it wasn't sort of concrete, because I think at that time they still didn't know what league they were in. I'm sure Ali was under a lot of pressure with trying to get signings in, but then I think he turned up and there was only so many, 6 or 7 players at training, and when the season started, and I think the club were a bit all over the place, from didn't know what league we were going in, didn't know what players they had, and so I was waiting on Rangers' offer, and I hadn't actually had an offer from them, and so I was shopping around. At that time, I was looking in. I wanted to go and play abroad, Norway, and there was teams in the Champions League that I had the chance of going to. And then I was actually in Germany speaking to a German club when my agent rang me and says, "Look, Rangers have made you a contract offer here." So I always knew if Rangers ever made me an offer, then I was always going there. You know, it was a no-brainer from my background and where I was from, and growing up with Rangers, and my sort of all my family and friends, and everyone's massive Rangers fans, you know, and so it was an easy decision in one way. I always said to myself, if I ever got a chance to sign to the club, I would do it no matter what. And it was just funny how it worked out, because I was in Germany at the time, and I had just arrived in the baggage reclaim bit in Germany, and I was meeting a club, and there was a big guy standing outside the double doors with Dean Shiels written on his bit of paper to pick me up. And I was actually on the phone to my agent, and he said, "Look, Rangers have made you an offer." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do now? You've sent me to Germany to speak to these Germans." And this big guy standing waiting on me. And so I had to go in, play along with the Germans sort of until I got to wherever I was going. And then I spoke to their chairman, and their man said, "Look, I'm sorry, I've wasted your time. I'll pay for my own flight home, and I'm going to sign for Rangers." You know, it was just a bit strange situation for me.
So certainly an offer that you couldn't turn down rather. That's actually, see, from a supporter's point of view, that's actually a good thing to hear. Obviously, it must have been a difficult situation for you, but we know that you obviously are back down supporting the club and things like that. So you've joined the journey in Division 3. We've had past guests on, including Neil Alexander, Andy Little and things, and the feedback's always been mixed. What are your memories of the 3rd Division? Neil Alexander, for example, said that he didn't like it at all because it was just tiny dressing rooms, cramped, it was difficult conditions, and it wasn't what he was kind of used to in previous years, although he enjoyed playing for the club. Obviously, what do you feel about your time looking back on the 3rd Division?
I think, obviously, the home games were fantastic. Like, the club had just been obviously gone down, but the crowds were phenomenal at home, you know. So there was always that buzz of playing at Ibrox. That'll never go away. Do you know what I mean? But the away games were extremely difficult because of the setup of the other teams in small away grounds, and I think we didn't really have a settled team, and it was very difficult conditions, and I think we could have done better in that first league down there, but it was difficult, to be honest. Obviously, there was still a bit of uncertainty off the pitch, and the squad had just been thrown together quickly, and it was just important about getting out of it, you know. But for me, on a personal point of view, it was very disappointing because I done my knee against Annan at Ibrox, and it took me ages to get over that. Do you know what I mean? So I was starting to play well, and then I sort of got a real mishap with that, and it put me right back, you know. But the lads went on. I didn't finish the season. In the second half of the season, I was completely out of it. So, but at the start, it was hard. We were going to places like Annan, whose pitch size was just like a quarter the size of Ibrox, and they would just stand there and boot you and kick the ball and not give you any space. And then you go to Ibrox and there'd be bags of room to play. And it was just one extreme to the other, you know.
No, I can certainly understand that. A lot of the away trips, I don't remember too many high-scoring victories. There was, obviously, at home we got a lot of good results. Like you say, there was more room. But Dean, before your injury in that year, you had 7 goals. One of them came against Motherwell in the early rounds of the League Cup. Do you have a favourite moment from the third division before the injury and that kind of ruled you out?
I think it would be the Motherwell game. I think I scored a volley that night, and I set up jig for the other one. It was a good night because obviously the club had been battered from every part of Scotland, and when a Premiership club came, they were wonder could they do it against a Premier League team, and then obviously we went and convincingly. We really, really were worthy of a 2-0 win that night. We completely battered Motherwell, and that was one of the most enjoyable moments of that year, to be honest. Motherwell had obviously a decent team at the time, and we're always in around that third, fourth, I think, going for Europe. So it sort of laid down a marker that we were on our way back, slowly but surely.
Yeah, that was a good night. I remember Ibrox was particularly loud. It was like a European game. And as you said, Jig scored a fantastic header, which you set up at the Copeland end, and it was a cracking night. Moving on, as we kind of go through, second division, you returned from injury, but again, it was a bit stop-start. You got another injury, but you still managed 8 goals in 18 games. You had a good return during this time. Ali Mccoist was struggling a wee bit. The fans were... We maybe had an expectation that we should have steamrollered everybody, but there was a lot of things going on at the club. How important was Ali Mccoist keeping things together, and how was he with you in the dressing room and with the other players?
I think he's obviously an upbeat character anyway, so I think obviously he knew more than what the players knew. There was difficult moments, obviously, for him as a manager. He was having to shield the players and protect the players from a lot of the board and a lot of things that were going on probably that we didn't know about, and he was under pressure. Obviously, sometimes we weren't getting the results that we needed, and there was talk of takeovers. There was always a new chief executive comes in. I remember we used to go to the Rangers dinners where the players would attend, whether it be a charity dinner or whether it be a club dinner for different reasons, and the chief executive has always stand up and make this big speech of how he gets what Rangers is about. He's came from somewhere else, but he wants to stay for a long time. And then by the next dinner we had, there was a new chief exec making the same speech, So Ali was obviously having to deal with that, have to pick a team on a Saturday and then get abuse from different angles of what comes with managing an old firm team. And obviously he's good at still keeping morale and the character up. Durante was great for getting in around the players and trying to help them, and obviously it was a difficult time for me that second season. I sort of was just coming over my injury. I picked up one towards Christmas, but I think I finished the season really strong. I had a good second half of the season, but no, it was difficult for everyone, and obviously he takes the brunt of it. Knowing, I think that's the year the board were trying to get us to take wage cuts, and there was things going on, and that just causes uncertainty within the team, and after that I didn't really know, you know what I mean. It just turned sour for Ali, and then obviously he was gone, and things just changed quickly again,
Yeah, that was something I wasn't going to talk too much because obviously it's a difficult thing for us to talk about. But when I was researching and just looking over, during your first 3 years at the club, as you said, the turnover in boardroom, chief executives, and then as you commented there, trying to get wage cuts and everything, it must have been horrendous. Up until Ali obviously leaves, Kenny McDowell's put in, and during that kind of period, Rangers, we went to Easter Road, we got a drubbing. Things are really rock bottom, more or less. And
that was the lowest of the low. Like that was the lowest of the low. I remember that day going to Hibs, and it was just embarrassing. It was just completely embarrassing. I actually felt sorry for Kenny in a way as well, because obviously he had been so loyal to Ali, and he was thrown in the job, and I don't even think he wanted the job, but he obviously loved the club. He was just helping out, and then I think what happened. I remember Kenny speaking to I was one of the older players at the time, and he pulled some of us and he said, look, basically there's 5 lads coming up from Newcastle. I've been told they have to play. And then that just became an embarrassment too. he says, I didn't know anything about it, but the 5 lads are on their way. And then there was just always something. The club was just full of drama. There was always something else happening, and do you know what I mean? I'm sure the papers had a field day in those times when the club was struggling internally, but there was always drama within the club. It was stuff that didn't get to the press as well, that happened in with the club. But it was never really a dull moment around those times. But it was quite embarrassing at times, when on the pitch stuff started to be affected by off the pitch stuff.
Yeah, as I said, see looking back and getting together this podcast, some of the things are horrendous, and it actually brings a shudder when we talk about it and think about it. But we'll move on, because King arrives, the club, the boardroom get taken over, there's stability. We end the season under Stuart McCall strongly, but fall short in the playoffs. And then there's a kind of dramatic turnaround. Mark Warburton arrives, and you're retained. You've still got a year left in your deal. But what was Mark Warburton and Davy Weir like when they first arrived? Because from a fan's point of view, it very quickly went on the right track, and we did produce some really great early form, and we started strongly.
It was a breath of fresh air in pre-season. I remember when Davy and Warburton come in, they just completely changed the mentality. They wanted to play. They give the players sort of a say in the changing room. They wanted to play good football, and we had gone through a lot of stuff where the football wasn't great, if we're being totally honest, in the couple of divisions below, and he wanted to sort of do things right, and the training was brilliant. Davy Weir was fantastic with the players, great to be around, and he brought in good players as well. I think that helped. Waghorn, Tavernier, these players came in, and I think some of the football was really good that year, really, really good. And but still, there were still moments when there was difficulties off the pitch too with different things. But no, he was a breath of fresh air at the start when he came in. It was quite a good time at that time. We sort of thought we're getting closer now to the Premiership. Maybe he's the man to sort of get us back there.
As you said, there was some good highs under Warburton, especially in the first year. They played an attacking style that seemed to suit you better as well. It was on the ground, it was fast, it was different. We certainly started off really well. We had some highs as well, even though it was only the Challenge Cup. We beat some good teams on the way. We had Hibs, Ayr, Livingston, St Mirren. You had game time in the final against Peterhead. You come on for the last 15, 20 minutes in a sold-out Hampden. And that was kind of a warm-up for the Scottish Cup run, having already beaten Kilmarnock and Dundee. We then got Celtic. Would it be right in saying that Celtic, the semi-final win, would that be up there with the pinnacle of your Rangers career?
I think so. It has to be. Winning in Old Firm's just, it's obviously, you grew up watching them, like you're glued to them when they're on the TV when you're young, and just to be part of it, was great. But I think it was more of a bigger statement for the club that day, that we had played, I think Kenny Madow was the manager, we had played Celtic and it was an embarrassment. I think they beat us 1 or 2-0 and we never get a shot, and people were writing us off for years. And I think the journey we had through the leagues, that was all the relief coming out after beating Celtic in that semi-final, because it had been so long since we had beaten them. And it was definitely a high moment for my career, playing and winning at Hampden. It was sold out. There's no better feeling, and I think the relief, sort of the statement we put down that day, we didn't just beat them, we beat them in penalties, but we really gave them a football lesson in the first half, and I think it sort of showed them again that we're getting closer, and it was a great day for the club after all the turmoil,
Yeah, that was certainly a high. The final was a disappointment. You obviously, again, you played he came on against Hibs with, I think, 20 minutes to go, if I remember rightly.
Yeah. That was probably one. I would say that's maybe that and the Motherwell. The Motherwell get beaten in the playoffs, probably the lowest point. I didn't speak to anyone after we beaten that final by Hibs for about a week. I just couldn't deal with it, obviously. And then the rubbish with their fans coming on, and it was just a very, very hard. It was very hard to swallow that one. You know, that one hurt big. But we seemed to be in control of the game at one stage, and then I think it was 2 set pieces that done us, and in the end, it ended up being my last game for the club, I think.
Yeah, it was certainly a difficult one, especially being 2-1 up with 10 minutes kind of left.
Yeah.
And that brings us, before we kind of finish up on the questions of your time at Rangers, we've got a wee bit more on to come. But how did you, under Warburton, how did it end with the club and with Mark? Was it just a case of, you know, happy to go separate ways, or was there a difficult decision, etc.?
Initially, I was staying. I was staying. I thought I was staying, and then I was basically. If you want the brutal truth, there was a deal shook hands on, and I was on holiday, and I came back from holiday, and I had been offered a deal. I think it was towards the end of the season, and it was always my intentions to stay. I came back from holiday, everything was agreed, and then my agent rang and says, "Look, Dean's got time here. He can come in now and sign that contract. He's just back from holiday." And then there was sort of humming in hand from Andrew Dixon, and then I couldn't get hold of Warburton. All of a sudden, he went Jack Bauer on me. And then I got a call from my agent to say, "Look, they're signing Nico Crankar and Joey Barton. Don't think they're going to have enough room anymore. They're putting all their money into them too." And I just went, right, fair enough. But the deal was shaken on, and I shook Mark Warburton's hand after the Hibs, the cup final at Ibrox that night after the game, and everything seemed to be sorted. But I was away. The club were, you go away on holiday, and obviously you have to fit it in when it suits. And I thought it was just a matter of driving around the corner and getting it signed, and then obviously going back home. But it just wasn't to be. In the end, it was disappointing. But I think it was a good time to leave at that point, to be honest. The club were wanting to go in another way. Obviously, they wanted to bring in bigger name players on big wages, and obviously the game time would have probably been even more limited. Do you know what I mean? But it's just a shame how it ended. I remember Davy Weir was on holiday as well at the same time, and he rung me and goes, "What's happening?" And I says, "Well, what do you mean, Davy?" He goes, "Have you signed yet?" And I says, "No, I've not." And he says, "I thought you were signing." I said, "No, it's been taken off the table." So I think Davy was a bit embarrassed by how it all happened, because Davy's 100% straight down the line, you know, and he was a bit upset by how things ended. But look, that's football. You move on, and it was actually the right time for me to move the club. I was going to say they wanted to go in a different direction, but I think it could have obviously been handled differently, you know.
Yeah, that's never good to hear. But for what it's worth, Dean, last night when we were doing this today, I asked people if they had any questions for you. There's a couple of questions here, but the overriding message, and I'll quote one from a boy called Nathan, was not a question for Dean so much, but can you tell him and thank him for his service to our club in its time of need? And I'm sure every Rangers fan welcomes him at Ibrox whenever he visits. And that's something that a lot of people have said when I've asked this. There's been no bad comments, and everybody thanks you, and everybody enjoyed your time at the club. Is there anything you want to say back to the fans?
No, obviously, sometimes when you leave clubs, you don't get to say goodbye. Obviously, it was a tough 4 years. It was an honour for me to pull on the blue jersey. Do you know what I mean? It's something that that's probably the pinnacle of my career, obviously, along with playing for my country. But I'm just delighted now that the club are back to where they where they should be, fighting for the title. And obviously, to be part of that, something that helped rebuild the club. I know I only contributed in a small kind of way, but I'll always look back with pride at the chance to pull on the blue shirt at Ibrox. I remember obviously scoring a hat-trick. I've got the big picture framed against Dunfermline at Ibrox is something that I'll cherish. And even I probably would have been happy just playing one game, but I think I got 131 games or something for the club, so it's something that I'll always look back on with pride, and I will be going back and forth. I've still got good friends there and around the club, so it's obviously been the highlight of my career to represent a club of the size, and it's something. The fans were always good with me, and as I said, when times were tough down there, they stood by us, and I think if it hadn't have been for the fans, any other club without that fan base would have gone under, and I think when the club get back to winning another title, I'll take great satisfaction in knowing that I helped with a tiny bit of getting them back,
Just when you mentioned, just a couple quick ones here, Dean. Just when you mentioned the Northern Ireland link there as well, Steve Davis, obviously somebody that's hugely influential for Rangers at the moment. Could you give us a bit of insight into what Davo will be like in that dressing room, and also what he's still bringing to the team in the middle of the park?
You can see that what his influence that he brings. He brings calmness. He keeps possession. He's smart with the ball, and I think he's seen it even, especially in Europe. He's been phenomenal at times when he's helped dictate play and knows when to keep it, when to force it, and raise the tempo. He's just an all-round top player, and he has been. His leadership skills are going to be massive. I know he didn't play there against Kilmarnock, but he came back in. But as you say, when you're looking at leaders and knowing how to win titles, he's been there and done it. And obviously, I've known him all my life, and he's a great fella, and he's a great option to have. And I'm sure that he's very key for Stephen Gerrard's plans for next season and pushing on.
He also still looks as if he's probably got a couple of more years left in him, certainly at this level. But is he a type of character and a type of kind of football man that you can see potentially moving on and being a coach or a manager in his own right one day?
I don't know. I was doing my badges last 2 years, and I keep telling him they need to come do them with me, and he's humming in hand, and I'm not sure if he wants to be honest. I don't think he's too keen. I think obviously when he's finished playing, he might maybe look into it a bit more, but I'm not sure he wants to. I was on to him to do them with me the last couple of years, but he hasn't bothered. So I'm sure once he's finished, he's still got loads of time in him yet. So I'm sure once he's finished, he has the attributes. Obviously, he knows the game, and he's a good leader. So I'm sure he'll have that option maybe when he finishes.
Is that the next step in your career? Is that how you see the next couple of years planning for you, not going on and trying to follow your dad's lead into the dugout?
I think so. Obviously, I'm still learning. I'm going through all my badges, and I'm finishing off my A license at the moment. So I'm enjoying it. I'm doing a lot of coaching with kids in this area and that. So yeah, it's something I really enjoy doing. So hopefully that takes me somewhere where I can give back to the game, where obviously I was so fortunate to get so many good memories out of football. So if I can help people, then so be it,
And just finally from me, Dean, what have you made of the impact that Stephen Gerrard's made? Also, there's been some good times, there's been some bad times, but overall, he's really taken Rangers back to where they can be and where they should be, and certainly raised standards and raised levels on and off the park.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's brilliant. I think obviously without winning anything yet, but I'm sure that'll come. But I think I think he gets it. I think some managers come into Rangers or whatever, or some people come to the club and they don't get it, and they struggle. But I think he understands what the club's about, and they are improving. Obviously since Christmas, it's maybe dipped a bit. But if you look at the overall picture, we are getting there closer, and I think that I definitely think he's the man to push us on to get that next title. You know, will it be this year? I hope so, but if not, I'd expect him to do it next year.
Dean, just before we go, because I know we're conscious of time, you're a busy man, you need to go and pick the wee one up. So before we go, something that a lot of people ask, and what's your favourite memory overall at your time at Ibrox?
Obviously, the Old Firm was brilliant. It was special, but I think it was my first goal. It wasn't a big game, but it was my debut against Dukey. I think Dukey was manager of East Fife at the time.
Yeah, and
I think it was just the fact that I was putting on the blue jersey and I was making my debut at Ibrox, and then I got my goal, and it was just something that will stay with me, you know. I think that's just to get to do it once, you know, and realise that it was I would say I would go for my debut at Ibrox, because it sort of starts to hit home that I've actually managed to do it, you know what I mean? So I would go for that. Although there was a few maybe moments with goals or whatever, but I would definitely go for my debut.
Okay, Dean. As I said, you've given up your time to come on and talk about your time and in your career. We're very thankful, Dean, that you were part of the journey, and thankful for your service. And as the message said before, we hope to see you back at Ibrox soon. And thank you very much for giving your time and coming to talk to us today on the 4LadsHadADream podcast.
No problem, lads. No problem. Thanks for having me. Good luck then.
So that is another edition of the 4LadsHadADream podcast completed. As a huge thank you to Dean Shiels for joining us. He was extremely busy, managed to give up half an hour of his time. I know that he needs to go and run and pick up his wee one and things, but that just shows you the dedication of these guys. They don't mind coming on, they give up their free time to come and speak to us. So that is really appreciated. It's always lovely to get a wee insight into these guys who've lived the dream and wore the jersey and that. So I hope everyone enjoyed it, and it was certainly a good listen. As usual, it's a huge thanks to our co-host, Mr. Chris Jack, for joining us. Chris, thank you.
No problem at all. Really enjoyed that. Dean was always good to deal with when he was at Rangers. It was nice to catch up and to hear from him again.
Yeah, it was definitely a good story. It just shows you, Chris, how far that we've come when you think about the time with Dean, and obviously he touched on it, and it was not something I wanted to push too much because it's not a good topic of conversation. But when you look at the things that he endured off the pitch, on the pitch during his time at Rangers, he certainly didn't have the kind of free run that Gerrard has, and just having to concentrate on results on the pitch.
As I say, it was a difficult time. He had some highs and he had some lows. And also, everybody will remember the Celtic Cup final, and it was interesting to hear how he left after that cup final as well, and the inside story, if you like, on the deal that he thought he had, but ultimately didn't get to sign. So that's really good to catch up with him, and I'm sure he'll go on and make a success of whatever lies ahead as a coach. And as I say, getting the chance to follow in his dad's footsteps, and it'd be interesting if I ever saw him back in the game here, but in the dugout instead.
Yeah, certainly one to watch. We'll look forward to seeing how Dean gets on. And for us going forward, we'll be back next month. We hope to finish the Alex Mccoist podcast soon. There's just so much content. Alex has been kind enough, and he'll join us again soon. We'll finish that. So we think after Dean Shiels is out, we think Alex will most likely be the next one. And then we've got a few more guests lined up to join us. So I hope that you will continue to listen. Of course, you can subscribe to the Gersnet Podcast, and you will automatically get the 4LadsHadADream podcast through that site also. And get yourself onto the Gersnet website. We're on there posting daily all things Rangers. And of course, you can follow Chris Jack on Twitter. He is Chris_Jack89 on Twitter. And Chris obviously does daily articles on Rangers in his role with the Glasgow Times. Myself, you can join us, 4LadsHadADream on Twitter. I'm also on Twitter at Stevie Clifford 27. Come and follow us. Come and check out 4LadsHadADream site. And all that's left to be seen. Hopefully, we'll speak to you again. We'll get you again next month to listen to the podcast. And all that's left to be said is thanks for listening. Ignore the nonsense, the irrelevant, and the noise. Thank you.